Few people will ever understand what you carry in your mind, and most will be afraid of what you see. If you've noticed things no one else picked up on, if you've felt truths no one dared to say aloud, then you know what it's like to live with a rare mind. A perception that cuts through masks, sees invisible patterns, and touches layers of reality most people prefer to deny. It's a gift, but also a sentence. Here, we don't run from the shadow. We study it. We use it to transform ourselves. So if you want to learn how to see what the rest of the world ignores, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the journey that starts here will forever change the way you see life. There is a kind of mind that doesn't fit the mold. It thinks faster, deeper, wider, and pays the price for it. It's not about being smart in the way the world celebrates. It's more like having an antenna tuned to a frequency almost no one else can hear. While others get distracted by the obvious, this mind catches the subtext, the half-second glance, the pause in speech that reveals more than 1,000 words. It feels like a blessing, until you realize that seeing too much is also feeling too much. And when you feel too much, every encounter becomes an emotional autopsy. Carl Jung knew this well. The rare mind lives between the fascination of understanding the world and the weight of being unable to turn off this perception. It's like carrying a magnifying glass that enlarges not only beauty, but also every crack. At first, you think it's a gift. Later, you understand it's a calling. And callings like this are never light. They demand that you go deeper, even when everyone else begs you to stay at the surface. This mental frequency isn't something you get from books, courses, or motivational talks. It's born as an instinct, but sharpened by life, especially by pain. It's the falls, disappointments, and betrayals that fine-tune the radar. While the world chases likes and approval, the rare mind is drawn to what's unsaid, to what hides in the gaps. That creates a kind of invisible loneliness. You can be surrounded by people, yet very few truly reach where you are. And it's not because you close yourself off, it's because few have the stamina to keep up with the depth you require. Jung said that every real encounter is a clash between two souls. And for those who think like this, there's no patience for lukewarm conversations, shallow relationships, or half-truths. The cost? You learn early that scarcity isn't about things. It's about people who truly know how to think. The greatest mistake is assuming that this kind of mind seeks company. In truth, it seeks an echo. But echoes are rare because most people speak from the persona, that social mask that shields from judgment but also kills authenticity. The rare mind feels this instantly. That's why many call it arrogant, cold, or distant. It's not coldness, it's filtering, choosing to spend energy only where there's depth of exchange. But this filter drives away far more people than it attracts. And when you begin to understand that maybe 99% of people will never truly grasp your frequency, you face the dilemma. Do you adapt to be understood, or do you stay intact and accept solitude as the price? This is where the loop begins for the next step, because seeing beyond requires understanding what's connected by invisible threads. Those who see patterns don't live in the same world as everyone else. While most people see isolated events, a trained mind sees connections, subtle threads that link yesterday to today, the micro to the macro, the visible to the hidden. It's not superstition, it's sharpened perception. Jung would call it archetypal vision, the ability to see that nothing happens in isolation, that everything is part of a web. A casual sentence over lunch explains a behavior 3 years later. A symbol scribbled in a notebook reveals the psyche of the one who wrote it. A dream that seems meaningless carries an entire map of what's to come. But here's the thing, those who see patterns are rarely welcome, because noticing what others don't is, deep down, a threat. It's exposing that what they thought was random always had a hidden script, and that maybe that script wasn't written by them at all. This ability isn't limited to people. It extends to the entire world: economics, politics, art, relationships, mass behavior. A mind that sees patterns reads headlines like someone reading oracles. It senses when a cultural trend is about to explode, when a company is going to collapse, when a relationship is doomed, long before those involved admit it. That might sound like power, but it's a burden, because seeing the pattern doesn't give you control over it. You know the storm is coming, but you can't stop it. It's like watching someone walk toward a cliff while smiling. And when you warn them, they call you pessimistic or paranoid. That's why many who carry this vision learn to remain silent. They keep the invisible map to themselves, like someone holding a dangerous secret. There's a reason Jung valued this vision so highly. It's the foundation of individuation. Recognizing patterns is recognizing yourself within them. It's noticing how you repeat choices, how certain coincidences are really invitations from the unconscious, how every shadow you meet out there is a reflection of the one within you. But to reach this level, you need courage to face not only the external pattern, but also the internal one, the one you're afraid to admit. And that's when the invisible map stops being about the world and starts being about you. When that happens, perception stops being just a talent and becomes a portal to deeper layers of reality. Layers most people will never dare to cross, but that lead directly to the next stage of the journey. Few realize that the world isn't a flat photograph. For most, life is reduced to what the eyes capture and logic classifies. But for those who see beyond, reality is like a series of overlapping doors, each hiding another story, another meaning, another version of events. This kind of perception isn't satisfied with the surface. It pokes, disassembles, and crosses through. It's like watching a film and noticing that behind the obvious plot, there's a silent narrative made of subtle gestures, strategic pauses, symbols no one talks about. Carl Jung said that ordinary consciousness is just an island surrounded by the vast ocean of the unconscious. Those who access deeper layers understand that every conversation, every encounter, every coincidence carries invisible subtexts shaped by old memories and psychic forces the person themselves doesn't know. That's where spirituality meets depth psychology, in the realization that everything has meaning, even what seems irrelevant. This kind of vision isn't a comfortable gift. It demands constant attention and often isolates. Because seeing what no one else sees also means noticing what no one wants to admit. Imagine walking into a room where everyone is laughing at a joke, but you can sense that the laughter is only a disguise for the tension hanging in the air. It's like listening to a song and catching deep in the background a dissonant note that betrays something wrong. Those who live in layered reality develop a kind of emotional and symbolic radar. They detect patterns of behavior, associations between events, even connections the very protagonist of the story is unaware of. This kind of reading can't be learned from ordinary books. It's born from the fusion of sharp intuition and the mental discipline to notice the unspoken. Jung called it reading the collective unconscious, capturing not only what is individual, but also what is shared and invisible. The challenge is that the more you see, the harder it becomes to settle for ready-made answers or linear narratives. You realize that reality moves like a kaleidoscope, changing with each angle, each moment, revealing that truth is often just a matter of perspective. And while this perception is liberating, it can also be exhausting. Layered reality is like playing chess on multiple boards at once. While others follow only the most visible pieces, you're analyzing invisible moves, undeclared intentions, and the forces pulling the strings behind the stage. This skill changes how you relate, negotiate, and even interpret your own story. You begin to understand that many conflicts don't originate where they appear to, but in earlier layers, old wounds, hidden complexes, unspoken beliefs. And that understanding can be used to heal or manipulate, to unite or divide. That's why few can bear to live with this level of perception. It requires courage to confront not only someone else's lies, but also your own. And once you learn to see this way, there's no going back. The surface stops being enough, and the call to go deeper becomes impossible to ignore, just as it becomes impossible not to notice, in the next step, who is really pulling the strings of this invisible game. Most people spend their lives running from their own shadow, as if it were a lurking monster. But for those who dive into Jung's depth psychology, the shadow is precisely the most relentless and most honest teacher. The shadow doesn't care about who you think you are. It knows exactly who you are. It doesn't negotiate with your persona, doesn't care about the medals you've collected to feel worthy. It goes straight to the point, exposing what you repress, what you deny, what you swore you'd never be. And that revelation hurts because it dismantles the fantasy you've built about yourself. The shadow isn't some psychological whim, it's a survival system of the psyche. It stores what you couldn't face in the past, waiting for the day you have the courage to go back and reclaim those parts. Until you do, every relationship, every failure, every crisis will be shaped to force you to look at what you've avoided. The teacher is always present, but few have the courage to sit in front of it. Facing the shadow isn't an intellectual exercise. It's no use reading about archetypes and individuation if you're not willing to confront your own anger, envy, resentment, and desire. Jung said that what you most fear to see in yourself is exactly what most needs to be integrated. But most people prefer to keep their evolved image intact, hiding the chaos behind speeches of peace and love. The shadow laughs at that. It knows when you're using spirituality as makeup for open wounds. The real work is messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes humiliating. It's admitting that you also manipulate, that you also lie, that you also desire what you condemn. Not to drown in guilt, but to be aware that every human being is a mix of light and darkness. The shadow is the constant reminder that denying what you are doesn't make you better. It just makes you less whole. And with every step you take toward integrating it, you feel the weight of the persona begin to dissolve. But integrating the shadow isn't something you do once and then it's done. It's an ongoing relationship with the most honest part of yourself. It's like having a mentor who will never spare you from the truth, no matter how much you beg. It will test you in your relationships, in your work, in your daily decisions. It will provoke situations where your social mask doesn't work, leaving you exposed before who you truly are. And then comes the choice. Run away again, reinforcing the persona, or remain in the discomfort until you become someone who no longer needs to hide from themselves. When you understand that the shadow is a teacher, not an enemy, you begin to see that it's not working against you, it's working for your individuation. And that's when the next portal appears. The ability to read the language of the symbols it uses to speak to you. Few realize that the psyche doesn't speak Portuguese, English, or any other human language. It speaks in the language of symbols. And if you don't learn this language, you remain illiterate in your own inner world. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. Dreams, synchronicities, even physical symptoms are letters sent by the unconscious, written in metaphor. Ignore them, and they come back stronger, stranger, more impossible to ignore. A dream about a house in ruins may be your psychic structure asking for attention. A string of improbable encounters might be telling you something needs to change now, not later. But the modern world doesn't teach us to read these signs. It teaches us to take pills, to silence the body, to distract ourselves so we don't hear the mind, to laugh off coincidences as nonsense. Yet for those who begin to understand this language, each symbol is a folded map hidden inside another map. Reading symbols isn't about cheap mysticism, it's about psychic literacy. It's knowing that when the unconscious shows you a wolf, it's not talking about zoology. It's talking about instinct, primal strength, the part of you that hasn't been domesticated by the persona. It's understanding that when a dream puts you in a labyrinth, you may be living an individuation process that demands patience and courage to avoid shortcuts. This reading requires looking inward with the same focus you look outward. And it requires practice, writing down dreams every day, observing repeating patterns in your life, noticing which symbols have followed you for years. For Jung, this was the bridge between the conscious and the self, the translation of the unconscious into a comprehensible language. And that translation changes everything, because from that moment on, you no longer live in the dark. You live in constant dialogue with the deepest parts of yourself. But understanding the language of symbols isn't just about interpretation, it's about response. When the psyche speaks to you, you must respond with action, not just reflection. If a dream shows you're trapped in a situation, writing it in your journal isn't enough. You need to move in the physical world. If life keeps sending you repeated signs about the same issue, it's not coincidence, it's insistence. The unconscious isn't subtle with those who don't pay attention. And when you begin to respond, you notice that this conversation creates a new way of thinking. Logic stops being a straight line and starts to dance with intuition. And it's exactly in this transition that the next portal in the journey opens. For most people, logic and intuition live on opposite sides of a boxing ring. On one side, the coldness of analysis, spreadsheets, and linear reasoning. On the other, the fluidity of feeling, the silent reading of signs, the knowing without being able to explain why. But for rare minds, as Jung knew, there is no war, there is a dance. Logic without intuition is blind. Intuition without logic is naive. When the two meet, a kind of perception is born that dismantles illusions and builds solid paths without losing sensitivity. It's like playing chess on two boards. In the visible, you calculate moves. In the invisible, you sense the energy of the move before making it. Most people live choosing one side, but those who integrate both see the world as a living system where facts and symbols intertwine. This integration doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of training, presence, and the courage to trust what can't yet be proven. Logic dances with intuition when you analyze a situation, but also pay attention to that discomfort you can't quite explain, and take it seriously. When you decide to invest in something because the numbers make sense, but only move forward once you feel the timing is right. Jung would say this ability is part of individuation, uniting opposites within yourself to create a more complete psyche. In daily life, it means making more assertive decisions, avoiding emotional traps, and at the same time, not losing yourself in the cold calculation that kills creativity. It's living with your feet on the ground and your eyes on the horizon. When logic and intuition merge, you begin to see that the world is not just cause and effect, it's also field and resonance. A seemingly casual conversation can contain the insight that changes your career. A piece of numerical data can be the symbol of a larger movement in the collective unconscious, and this perception is dangerous for those who like control, because it doesn't fit into rigid molds. It's unpredictable, and for that very reason, powerful. At this stage, you begin to see beyond social masks, where the persona falls and the authentic self is revealed. And it's precisely here that the next step in the journey becomes inevitable. On the surface, everyone wears a persona. It's the psychic clothing we've learned to wear to survive, be accepted, and avoid conflict. For most people, this mask is so fused to their face that there's no longer any difference between who they are and what they represent. But for a rare mind, as Jung described, the veil is almost transparent. It's impossible not to notice the glance that drifts away mid-conversation, the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the split-second pause before a rehearsed answer. Those who see beyond words know when someone is reciting a script rather than making a confession. This ability is both a gift and a burden, because in seeing the hidden, authentic self, you also see the lies that uphold the social theater. Seeing through the persona isn't about unmasking others to expose their weaknesses. It's about understanding the mechanism. The persona isn't an enemy, it's a form of protection that often saved the psyche from collapsing. Jung warned that tearing off a mask without offering a safe space for the real self to appear is like ripping a bandage from a wound that's still open. That's why deep perception demands maturity. It's not enough to see the wound. You have to understand the story that made that mask necessary. Here, depth psychology becomes a tool, interpreting the symbols behind behavior, sensing the invisible weight someone carries, recognizing the persona as part of the individuation process, not as the villain of the story. But this vision comes with an inevitable side effect: isolation, because when you see what others try to hide even from themselves, you stop playing the game. And when you don't play, you become unpredictable. And that scares people. You no longer engage in status battles. You're not manipulated by applause. You don't fit into the roles others expect of you. This is the point where existential solitude begins to grow, not as the absence of company, but as the realization that few can stand the presence of someone who sees too much. And it's precisely from this solitude that the next stage of the journey is born. It's not the absence of people that defines existential solitude. It's the absence of those who can truly meet you where you are. For someone who lives with the lens of depth psychology, every social interaction becomes a map to an internal territory that few have the courage to explore. While others talk about the weather, work, and distractions, your mind searches for the subtext, the insecurities disguised as humor, the fear hidden in absolute certainties, the emptiness camouflaged in busy schedules. And in perceiving the distance between what is lived on the surface and what pulses in the depths, a silence emerges that not even the noise of the crowd can break. Jung said that for the psyche, there is no greater punishment than being misunderstood. And this is the dilemma of the rare mind. It longs for authentic connection, yet carries an internal vocabulary that almost no one speaks. It's not arrogance, it's the reality of inhabiting an inner world full of symbols, archetypes, and meanings that don't fit into everyday language. That's why often you choose silence, not because you don't want to share, but because you realize that certain truths, if spoken too soon, become a burden to those who are not yet strong enough to carry them. The price of protecting depth is the feeling of walking alone, even in the middle of a crowd. But existential solitude, if endured, can also be a laboratory. It's in solitude that you gain the clarity to see where the persona ends and the self begins. It's in the empty space that individuation strengthens, away from the echo of other people's expectations. It is indeed an arid terrain, but fertile for those who learn to cultivate it. And it's precisely from this solitude that the deepest impulse is born, the search for real transformation. Not the kind that impresses others, but the one that rebuilds you from the core. This calling is inevitable, and it will be the next step. True transformation doesn't begin with a moment of light. It begins with an internal collapse. It's not romantic, it's brutal. It's when the structure you built to survive stops working, and the ego realizes it can no longer hold up the theater of the persona. At this point, the work of individuation stops being theory and becomes urgency. Jung knew that the soul does not tolerate stagnation. It will create cracks in your life until you are forced to cross. And crossing doesn't mean changing jobs, cities, or relationships. It means dying to what you believed yourself to be, so that you can be reborn into something you never imagined you could become. The process is uncomfortable because it demands facing the shadow without anesthesia. It's about stopping calling your repressed traits flaws and beginning to recognize them as vital energy misdirected. It's about having the courage to look at the parts of yourself you swore you would never show anyone and asking, "What are you trying to tell me?" Real transformation isn't about erasing who you were. It's about reorganizing all your inner pieces so they serve your life instead of working against it. And this doesn't happen over a motivational weekend. It's daily, intimate, and relentless work. When you accept the calling, you realize there's no going back to the previous state. It's like crossing a bridge that burns behind you with every step. The self demands total presence. And as you move forward, you begin to understand that this symbolic death isn't the end, but the only way to access a level of consciousness the ordinary world will never offer. And at that point, something rare happens. You stop seeking only for yourself and begin to act as a translator between worlds, a role that few are ready to take on. But this is exactly the next destination. If you understand that living between two worlds is both a gift and a burden, those who go through individuation and return whole carry the responsibility of translating the collective unconscious into a language others can understand. It's like holding a map that reveals territories no one else knows exist. Jung saw these individuals as living bridges, people capable of walking between the visible and the invisible, between logic and myth, between what science confirms and what the soul senses. But being that bridge requires more than knowledge. It requires the ability to carry truths that may be rejected or distorted by those not ready to hear them. This role is not about performance, nor about creating a mystical or wise character to be admired. It's about serving as a channel for something greater than the ego, even when that means giving up recognition or approval. It's about translating dreams into understandable symbols, stories into practical lessons, intuitions into concrete paths, and at the same time, knowing that every translation loses some of the original essence, because what comes from the self can never be fully put into words. That's why this bridge is made not just of speech, but of presence. Deep down, those who hold this role know they don't belong fully to either side. They are not entirely of the inner world because they must act in the outer, and not entirely of the outer world because they carry the mark of those who have seen beyond the veil. It's this liminal position that allows them to inspire change without imposing it, to provoke without attacking, to guide without carrying. And even if the path is lonely, there is a rare clarity, knowing that as long as the bridge exists, the unconscious will have a voice, and humanity will have a chance to remember who it truly is. Now that you've come this far, the question is simple. Will you keep pretending you don't see, or will you use what you've learned to transform your life? Every pattern you identified, every shadow you faced, every symbol that made sense, it's not theory, it's a tool. What will you do with it? Will you go back to the blind comfort of the majority, or will you cross over to the other side where few dare to step? Because the truth is harsh. Knowing changes nothing. Acting changes everything. So if this message struck a chord with you, leave a comment about what cut you deepest, and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every video is another step deeper into your own mind. And you know, once you see, there's no way to unsee.